Hello and welcome. You're going to learn how to stretch today. As an introduction to stretching, I want to introduce you to 3 different types. The first type is what we call passive stretching. As a passive stretch, you simply put your leg up on something and you completely relax the entire muscle. You use the apparatus. I'm using a tree here. You might have a trainer that's holding your leg up. You might just have it on a bench. Or if you're watching TV or at your office, you might have it on your couch or your chair. And I have this muscle completely relaxed. So this is a nice introduction to stretching. As somebody advanced, you definitely won't use this, but your first time stretching, you definitely will want to try this way. Another way to do a passive stretch is I will hold my leg up and then just completely relax that muscle. And sure, I'm holding it, but I'm not actually trying to engage this muscle, and I'll just stand here with it. It's a nice way to get an introduction to letting blood flow into your muscle. If I'm doing it with my arm, I'll hold the arm across the chest, and you'll see a lot of beginner people working out. This is what everybody does. This is what they teach you in gym class, and I'm completely relaxing that arm. Another way to think about passive stretching is if I let go with this hand, that arm will just completely fall down. Another stretch you can do with this, holding the arm up behind your head. Again, I'm just relaxing it as much as I can behind me, and I let go and it'll fall down. After you learn how to passive stretch, you want to learn how to do active stretching. With active stretching, I'll do the same thing with my leg, but this time I'll hold it up in the air, actively engaging my muscles to do that. Now with active stretching, you aren't going to be able to hold that as long, and this is one of the most unpopular ways to stretch. However, I feel that if you understand active stretching, it'll actually help you engage your passive stretch better. So I might do 8 seconds here and hold that. And as I hold it up there, I learn how to engage my core better, I learn how to hold my posture, and that'll allow me to get even higher. After I understand active stretching, then I can go back to my passive stretch, and I no longer have to relax this low. I can actually get that leg a lot higher, and now I can just passively stretch into it. And that takes us into our third type of stretching, which is what we call static stretching. The static stretch is where you're here passively stretching. However, I will reach deep into it, and I'll just hold that at a really deep stretch. As I do that, I want to remember what I did in my active stretching. In order to hold this here on my own, I had to hold my chest high. I had to engage my core, and then I stretch as deep as I can into that. So the static stretching is a great way to learn how to engage even more blood flow into that muscle. Now let's look at that same stretch on a different muscle. Let's look at it on the arm over. Here we have the passive stretch, and the arm is just flopping, not really doing anything. To do an active stretch, I would do the exact same motion, but I'm going to hold it over there. In order to hold it over there, I need to realize I'm going to engage my core, drop my shoulder down, hold my chest high, and then hold the arm over. Now to do a static stretch with that, I'm going to actually hold it over and apply more pressure, and then actively stretch out into that. That's going to be my static stretch. Now the static stretch is actually the most popular that you'll see people do. People first start out passively stretching, but then you see people that are actually athletes, they'll go and pull that even further beyond what they're capable of. If you're a trainer with somebody, and instead of having them go up higher on a log, for example, when you're holding somebody's leg and they're just passively stretching, to turn it into a static stretch, you can simply raise their leg up higher. That turns that into a static stretch. So those 3 types are the most basic types of stretching that you want to do, and it's a really great way to learn how to engage your muscles more, bring more flexibility to them, and also maintain safety. Okay, moving on to our next type, we have isometric stretching. Now an isometric stretch is really great. It's actually one of the most beneficial stretches you can do. So really pay attention on this one. I'm going to get into that passive stretch, and we're just going to relax my muscle. But now as I relax it, I'm actually going to stretch it out and make that an engaged active stretch as I'm doing it. And now as I'm actively engaging stretching it, I'm not actually just having the muscle go out. I'm going to squeeze both thighs together. I'm going to apply pressure downwards, and you can see the difference. This is passive here. Now this is active. I'm standing up tall as I'm actively, passively engaging that muscle. But now I'm going to isometrically press in the opposite direction of the object that's helping me out. I'm going to press downward with my leg, and that's actually going to engage my relaxed fibers. So in stretching, we have two sets of fibers. We have one set that are relaxed, we have one set that are getting stretched. They're usually on opposite ends of each other. So as I'm here stretching and stretching into that, I'm actually engaging one set of those muscle fibers. Now as I contract that muscle, I engage a complete different set. The cool thing about an isometric stretch is I will stretch into that and I will get my leg up into a very high passive stretch, and now that it's passive, I'll actively engage it. And that teaches my body to actually stretch out the relaxed muscle fibers. And that's why we get such a stronger stretch with this one. Now after I do that for a few weeks, you'll actually see that your flexibility is 20–30% better than it was before. Okay, another way to do our isometric stretching is I can actually push on a wall, for example, and you'll see a lot of people do this as they're stretching out their calves. They will push against something and stretch that calf out, and now I'm actually trying to push the tree away, and that's impossible to do, and that actually will give me a nice strong calf stretch. As I do this, I maintain my active stretching. So in order to understand isometric stretching, you have to understand all of them. Passively, I can't really do this. Just standing here passively doesn't really do anything. Standing here actively, however, in an active stretch, it's a decent stretch. You learn how to hold that back there with strong posture and just maintain that motion. Now, after you learn it with an active stretch, we want to take that into an isometric stretch. With the isometric stretch, I'll actually push off of the tree and the ground at the same time, creating the isometric stretch. Now, the isometrics, it's actually an isolation of one muscle. I'm only stretching the back of my leg. Now for me, this is actually a stretch in my front of my leg and the back of my leg. As you get better flexibility, it'll actually isolate and you'll realize it's just your lower leg that's getting stretched right here. And the further I put that back and push even harder, the further it'll actually stretch into just that one muscle. You'll see a lot of people that don't actually understand active stretching. They'll get into this with bad posture and bend there, the shoulders are up, and you're actually not allowing blood flow, you're not allowing the muscle to have breath and air come into it. So maintaining very good posture as I push down into that is going to allow that blood flow to get there. Now obviously to have blood flow, you want air in your blood flow, so breathe deeply as you're doing any stretch. Okay, after you learn how to do isometric stretching, I really recommend you try out dynamic stretching. Dynamic stretching involves swinging your arms, swinging your legs, and I don't really like the word swinging because that makes it sound like it's not controlled. But for example, I'll swing my arms within their range of motion. I know that I can reach my arm over here very easily and reach it over here. Just swinging it out, that's a dynamic stretch. Think of a rubber band. You could take a rubber band and just kind of pull on it a little bit in each direction. That'll warm it up, that'll make it more flexible. Same thing we want to do with our muscles. I'll swing them up, I'll just lift my legs. This is all dynamic stretching. You'll see basketball players do it, you'll see track runners do it. I'll lift my knees up high. That's all dynamic stretching. And when you do it kind of fast, you can get warmed up pretty quickly. You see a lot of runners do all of this. I'll stretch up above, just stretch out. That's all dynamic stretching. And you don't really need any kind of introduction to it. You've probably already done it if you're in athletics. And it's probably one of the most common one you'll see when people are really, really cold. It's a great way to get out there. You just start moving around. You can actually slowly engage your muscles and start playing your sport. You'll see a boxer get out in the ring and he'll just start boxing. He doesn't do any kind of warm up at all. He'll just box. Now, this is what you need to understand with dynamic stretching though. You stay within your range of motion. Once I reach past that range of motion and actually swing my arm way past where it's capable of going on its own, that becomes what we call ballistic stretching. So ballistic stretching is like a ball. You take that ball, ballistic, has the word ball in it, you take it and you compress it past where it's capable of, and that compression will make it bounce back. So my arm's gonna swing, and that's as far as I can take it on my own, but if I'm gonna bounce it further, it can go all the way here, then it bounces right back. So I'm gonna swing into that. Now you'll see this in more advanced athletics. You don't wanna do this with beginners. As an athlete yourself, I would recommend it, but for the beginner clients that you have, never do ballistic stretching with them. This is getting pretty advanced, and you now have to understand how to breathe into your motion. You need to even understand where you can do your dynamic stretching. Me, dynamically, I know I can get there, therefore I know ballistic, I can get here. I wouldn't, however, go way beyond that. You also can see people doing it with their legs. I'll reach up, this is dynamic stretching. I'm just trying to stretch out my leg. But now when I take it beyond my range of motion, I can't really get it there. I feel a stretch every time I do that. That is a ballistic stretch. Another thing you'll see that's the most common way for ballistic stretching to happen is people will bounce up high and jump with it. They turn it into like a plyometric stretch. I'll also bend down and I'll bounce into that. As I'm bouncing into it, I'm actually going way beyond where my muscle wants to go to. That's a really nice way to get ballistic stretching, and it elevates my heart rate almost immediately. Okay, so if you've learned every other type of stretching, you're ready for the last type of stretching. The last one that I know of anyway is P and F stretching. P and F stretching teaches you how to get actively into the muscle, statically into the muscle, isometrically into the muscle, dynamically into the muscle, and ballistically all at the same time. So you need to do all of the others before you do this one. The nice thing about P and F stretching is that it can actually take somebody that isn't very flexible and give them flexibility within just a few weeks. The downside of it is it takes a lot of strength and a lot of understanding of your body in order to actually accomplish that. As a trainer, I've been able to use this with my clients to get them into a full split within just 2 or 3 months, having just flexibility and range of motion down to their knees. So it's just phenomenal what you can do with a client once they understand P and F stretching. So P and F, I'll go ahead and I'll relax into that muscle and I'll lift it up here, and then I'll do the isometric stretch and I'll compress. But now the difference is I'll do ballistic isometric stretches. I'll compress into it, I'll release. I'll compress into it, I'll release. And I'll actually bounce into that a few times. And as I bounce into that, it's going to allow stronger range of motion. So I'm going to bounce into it, release, bounce in and release, bounce in, release. And there's a lot of different theories on how you can do this. Again, I like to take things back to the most simple form possible. And I like to think of it as a ball, as a rubber band. And think if you have a racquetball or a basketball and you want to warm it up, or if you have a rubber band, what's the quickest way if you have a rubber band in the freezer and it's just completely coated and you don't want to crack it, you don't want to tear it up, but you want it to become flexible so you can stretch it as far as possible and release it with it still having a lot of strength to it. That's the same thing we want to do with our muscles. We want them to have their strength but flexibility at the same time. Now you'll see a lot of people in ballet, they'll just go and they'll hold that muscle there. And they'll hold this for an hour, 2 hours. And then when they try to run, they have no strength left over at all. And I think that's a very weak muscle. I really like Thomas Kerr's designed way of stretching. He has a DVD I suggest called Scientifically Stretching. And it teaches, he's about 60 years old. Within 2 minutes, he can walk out, get straight into a split. And he uses this method as well. So going back to the P and F stretching, I will bounce into it, bounce into it, bounce into it, and then I'll statically hold that, okay? And you'll see my range of motion here. Since I've been doing the whole video on my right leg, I'm gonna switch over to my left and show you just how fast you can get flexibility into this. So I already have decent flexibility here. I can reach about right there. That feels pretty good for me. I can almost reach my toe. So starting out, I'll bounce into that, and I'll bounce a few times. After I bounce just 4 or 5 times, knowing where my range of motion is, I'll reach out and now I can go beyond the foot already. I'll just hold that for 3 seconds and then I'll release. I'll do my dynamic stretching and just stretch that out. And then I'll go back up and I'll do the exact same thing again. I'll bounce 1, 2, 3. I'm also pressing, I'm pressing downwards as I do this. I'll release, take a deep breath in, and I can reach way, way past it. So all of that just took me 30 seconds to get that stretch. And that's the P and F stretching. Now, if you're with a client, I like to stretch out a client, have them lie on the ground, and I'll put their leg up on my shoulder and then bring them up, and I'll do an isometric stretch with them. I'll hold them up there while they're pressing their leg back into me, and then I'll release back down. That's a nice isometric stretch. And we have an entire DVD that you can watch where we lift their leg up, we do P and F with them. It's with a dancer teaching how to get completely into a split. I really recommend that after you learn everything here, and that's going to help you understand P and F really, really well. Because as a trainer, I don't recommend you teach your clients how to do this on their own, but I do recommend that you learn how to do it on yourself, and then you progress into learning that video so that you can take it into your training.